All right, welcome back to Inside My Canoe Head. I'm your host, Dr. D. Today, we are going to talk about what is a prepper, what does it have to do in this world, and how do we see the relationship between AI, prepping, government, and a bunch of other things that are really important considering the world we live in right now. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverages. Let's get at her. All right, thank you very much, and thanks again for joining us. Listen, last week I knew I would touch some veins. I knew I would set off a number of individuals, and boy, did I. I tell you, by the end of day 3 of the AI clips coming up, or the AI-generated clips that were up on YouTube and other places, I've been called everything from a trucker to a moron to a fraud to some things that I will not repeat on a family-friendly show. I got accused of being stupid, dumb, idiotic. Let me see. Whenever you talk about the actions of a government in response to a disaster and whether or not the government should or should not impose limitations on human beings and individuals, you light the crowd. And that was the intent. Not because I just love to see the secret sauce kick out and love to see this pot stirred, which I do. Please don't get me wrong. But I think what we lack in society is a lot of these conversations, these important conversations we need to have about decisions and things that are happening around us, about understanding what root cause analysis is, and understanding that sometimes the knee-jerk reactions that we see politicians, governments, and individuals take are in reality the results of putting themselves in a position where they felt they had no alternative, but that they're in those positions because of actions they intelligently and logically took that they thought were appropriate at the time. And then there's a group of people who think that the government should or should not. Anyhow, it was really interesting. It lit up across all of the thing. I think the most comments came across on TikTok, which is not unfamiliar, but interesting, where people will say to you that, you say this is true, give me your evidence. Like, yeah, I'm going to sit down on TikTok, a social media platform, and I'm going to lay out a logical, well thought out and researched argument to present to you to make you happy that what I'm saying is true. What I'm saying is based upon evidence. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Lots of people don't, and I think that's great, and we need to have far more of those conversations. But what I'm telling you is grounded in evidence and grounded in facts. If you want to know what those evidence are, please ask. Absolutely. The fact that it disagrees with your worldview or disagrees how you think the world should be or how the world actually operates in your little framework, that's unfortunate but normal. We all have different belief systems, different lenses, different theoretical frameworks, which is perfectly fine. But I say this all the time, and I say it for myself too. Just because you believe something to be true, that does not make it true. Because you heard it in what you think is a trusted source, therefore it must be true, that doesn't make it true. What we've lost the art of is trust but verify. We used to have a legacy media system in Canada, and really, and this is nothing new, I've said this for years. I think media fell off a cliff when Peter Mansbridge retired. And for those of you that are old enough to understand the CBC, the second he left as the chief correspondent and retired, and the next gang came in, the entire system, the integrity, and the trust, not just in CBC, but across a lot of the landscape media, eroded and disappeared really quickly. And then they put a nail in their own coffin throughout the pandemic. So as such, we have a difficult time pursuing the truth. We have a difficult challenge in trying to understand what is a trusted source, what isn't a trusted source. Where do I go when I have an honest question that I'm really interested in finding the answer to, or at least more information? Where do I begin that conversation, and with whom do I have that conversation, irrespective of what the topic may be? It may be something about rules in youth soccer. It may be something about whether or not the government taxation rules in this instance have ever been challenged in the court. Is there ability to challenge? Or if you're an Air Canada flight attendant, do I really have to follow the back to work order? And if my union defies it, what is it that they can actually do to me? And I know by the time this comes to air, that whole thing will probably be settled in one way or another. But the point we're making is there's a lot of really interesting and intelligent questions that you and I both don't understand or have the full set of facts from. And what we challenge today, what we find challenging is, where do I go for the accurate information? And it's all based in the theory of trust. Now, I'm a social capital researcher, and so what I study is human relationships and the power of human relationships, specifically within the field of disaster and emergency management, in resiliency and at the community level. So how does the power of human relationships and the follow-on downstream effects, if you will, of those relationships, how does that influence someone or some community's ability to navigate a disaster? What is different about the communities that have strong social cohesion, strong bonds, and strong interpersonal relationships? Why do they always seem to do better? It's never a question of financial, and we've done enough work in this field to debunk the idea that your socioeconomic status or your access to money gives you a better disaster outcome. We know that's no longer a valid argument. What we don't completely understand is the state at which education, home ownership, and of a couple other things influence. And so we're getting better and better at that. But as we understand that, the word trust comes in, because strong social relationships, whether it's between you and I, or whether it's between myself and my close friends, the community organizations that I volunteer for, the company that I run, or all the other parts and players within the organization, the students when I instruct graduate education courses, and international organizations, I'm on the board of directors. There's a level of trust there that means when I tell you something, I'm doing it because I've done my research before I utter the words. I've looked at the data to the best extent possible that the data is available to support the position that I'm offering. In other words, saying, if I tell you I'm going to do something for you, it's not just because I'm doing that for my hip and now I'm going to figure out later. I'm going to figure out before I answer your question whether I can do it for you or not, and then commit to doing it. It's akin to, and I'm not anywhere near the same level, Matthew McConaughey is very famous in Hollywood for saying he is a very quick no and a very long yes. So if you want an immediate answer for him, he'll just hand back whatever it is and say the answer is no. If you're willing to give somebody the time to come up with an answer, then the answer might be yes, but if there's no time, it's an exact no. And so when you look for trusted relationships and trusted sources, you have to figure out for you what that means. Can somebody demonstrate to you that their evidence and the words that they're saying is based upon some form of data? Because remember, it's used this phrase all the time, but there's no such thing as your truth and my truth. That's a human condition, a human behavioral language that's chosen because people look through the world a normative of positive view. Do you look through the world as it is? Whether you like it or not is irrelevant. The world is like this. Or do you look at it through a frame that says, I really want the world to look like this, so my truth is the world looking for like that. And that's my truth. Truth means something has been proven to be correct. Or this is based upon what we know at the time, same definition for a fact, what we know at the time, based upon the evidence we have now, we know this to be true to the greatest extent possible. There's no absolutes, right? absolutely no absolutes. We know based upon historical evidence that tomorrow morning the sun will rise. We have every reason to believe, but we have no absolute guarantee. Those odds are pretty good. I'd bet on them if I were you. But that's the idea of truth. We know it to be true, and it's not speculation. What I often say on this podcast and many other channels and interviews that I do and conferences that I present on around Canada and around the world is I'll tell you when what I'm speaking about is evidence-based. And a lot of times when you're giving a speech or a YouTube video like this, I can't lay out, I say this is true, and here's the 7 pieces of evidence that back it up. But I'll also say when I think something's my opinion. When I'm not certain, uncertain, or I have some idea, but not absolute proof. And I'll tell you this is often true in the emergency management field because I'll do some research. I'll get a study. We've got one coming out in the Journal of Preparedness in Canada coming out at the end of August, where we did a study of well over 1,000 people in the United States of America looking at their attitude towards government and their trust in government, and was that correlated to their preparedness. That is a good piece of data. It's statistically significant. But for me to say it's true for all the rest of America writ large, I would logically want to look at what other pieces of data out there and to see whether the data that I've gathered is an anomaly, is it an exception, or does it reinforce what's already been said? Now, my data is statistically significant. It has enough people where I can say this is true. But we also like to confirm. So what we often say in the research world is this is generally indicating something to be true. We have sufficient evidence that we believe this to be true, but there's still a potential likelihood that there could be some other causes. We call them confounding variables. And this is when something is influencing an answer or a situation and we don't know it yet, right? There's something behind the scene, right? There's something behind the magical curtain that's pushing the buttons and we don't know it yet. We think it's out there. We think it's influencing the answer or the situation, whatever it is we're investigating, but we don't really know for certain, right? So today's discussion, we want to talk about what is a prepper. And the reason we want to talk about what is a prepper, because it came out of a couple of comments in the last video that I did on the Nova Scotia wildfire and why poor government preparedness is not an excuse to impose restriction on individuals' lives. And the restrictions are illogical anyhow. Let's just light up the keyboard warriors will come after me in this video too. And that's great. I love it. Bring it. It entertains me and it's part of the conversation. But when we think about what is a prepper, when we look at the research, I've been doing this and looking at preppers since 2013. And so 2025. So about 12 years now I've been studying the Canadian prepper movement. Not Canadian prepper as an individual. Absolutely great guy. But what I'm talking about is the Canadian prepper movement. The growth and the phenomena of preparedness as a specific line of thinking across Canada in urban and rural environments. I've been studying it for about 12 years now. So I have a reasonably large amount of data that I can look at. And again, I'm a scientist, so I look at data, not opinions and beliefs. I look at data. And so what I start to understand is when you talk and interview with enough people inside a preparedness movement who themselves are just taking on a little bit more, shall we say, you start to see some characteristics that are present. So I've talked about this in my 2 books that are out, in Preparedness Book 1, or Preparedness Simplified Book 1, The Beginning, that's available on preparednesslabs.ca and over at Amazon. I talk about a prepper as somebody who looks at there's a likelihood that we're going to have an extended interruption of government supports or societal support systems, potentially for a couple of months, but that it will resume. So a prepper is not somebody by definition who thinks we're looking at societal collapse that doesn't recover. A prepper is somebody who is looking at an extended period of societal support structure collapse. Now, I've written at length. We've done some YouTube videos. We've got some more coming up. But basically, society is run by 10 sectors of critical infrastructure. 16 in the US, doesn't matter, they're the same, different number in Europe. Right? From technologically to healthcare to manufacturing to safety to security to food, water, utilities, cell phone towers. They're all sectors of critical infrastructure. And when they fail, often starting with the power grid and then cascading down, you have an interruption of the systems that we count on every day. Most preparedness talks about the 0 to 14 days, which I recommend for individuals, of, being able to navigate that disruption without needing absolutely any intervention from the government or society other than your community. And we'll talk about community in a minute, for up to 14 days, because generally, and our research has shown, the data I have shows that 94% of the time, all the critical infrastructure is back up in North America within 14 days. So if you bet on 14 days in Canada or the United States of America, you're going to be right 94% of the time. I like those odds. I'll put money on it. So that's why I recommend 14 days. What a prepper thinks about is going out beyond that. They're thinking about the concept of not just, having canned food to feed themselves while the grocery stores are shut down, but they're thinking about food as a system. How do I replicate the food system? So in other words, how do I grow food and how do I procure food to feed myself and my family and those for whom I'm responsible for the period of time that the system may be down? So if, for example, we had an extended power outage that lasted 4 months. So the power grid is down in 4 months, transportation shut down, grocery stores closed and never reopened. Just period, never reopened. Often a catastrophic situation for the vast majority of people. A prepper will look at that and say, okay, obviously I'm going to have some food, but the idea of storing 2 to 3 years of food in your basement and all the systems to support it, etc., is a bit over the top and a bit wonky. It goes more to the survivalists. Those are the people who think that the world will actually collapse and won't replicate itself and won't recover. But preppers think about it as a system. And when I talk to most preppers, believe it or not, the vast majority of preppers that I have spoken to, which right now numbers somewhere in 65 to 70, they live urban or suburban. I live in a townhouse complex. They live in townhouse complexes. They're not on these off-grid farms. Those are people who are loud, but the quiet professional prepper. The quiet professional prepper who has a regular job, a regular full-time employment, and just goes about their day, and you would look at their house and it looks like everybody else's cookie cutter house, and you can't tell that there's any difference, and they look the same as everybody else. Their kids are in the same sports as you. They don't all drive jacked up pickup trucks with all of these attachments on the outside that are hilariously dumb, by the way, but that's just funny. Or, they don't all have rooftop tents on top of their Forerunners. They're just regular people. They drive BMWs, they drive sports cars, whatever. The professional prepper in your neighborhood is the vast majority of prepper. And what they do is they look at the systems upon which they rely and they're able to replicate them. And it's based on 4 things. It's based, number one, on they accept personal responsibility for your outcomes. I've said it 100 times on this video channel. I will continue to. The first step in adopting a prepared life or accepting preparedness is accepting responsibility for your outcomes. It is not anybody else's responsibility to save you. And if you fail, it's your fault. And I've got really long detailed videos on that somewhere back in the last 360 videos that I've done. The second part is attitude. If you accept responsibility for your outcome, your attitude comes from a framework of, it's not somebody else's job to take care of me, though that doesn't mean we don't have society programs to take care of those in need and take care of those who are vulnerable. But as long as I have the faculties and the ability to take care of myself and my family, I take it as an attitudinal frame that it is my responsibility to take care of my family, take care of my house, pay my bills, take care of all the arrangements, and make sure that should those support systems of which we count on, which is great, which is why most preppers actually, they are hooked up to the grid. They do all of the things everybody else does because you'd be dumb not to. The difference is they have the ability to replicate that when it goes down. For example, I can generate power time immemorial in my townhouse. You can figure out how. I have a solar generation system that takes solar power from the sun, converts it, adds it to a storage battery, and then I use that storage battery to run everything I need in my house. Very simple. It's portable. I don't have 47 panels on the side of my house. I'm not trying to run a full normal household. I have the ability to heat the house in the winter without needing access to natural gas or propane-fired fireplaces. I have the ability to create and generate food. All these things that I have is what a prepper does, right? I understand that it's my responsibility if after 30 days the grocery store does not reopen, that it's my responsibility to be able to feed my family. It's not a question of money. And I've said this 100 times. Nothing about preparedness is a question of money. It's a question of skills and knowledge. Skills and knowledge are your human capital. We often said that human capital is education, and education really is you gaining a skill to do something or a knowledge about something. And if you think about those two, that's what makes you self-reliant, which means when there is an issue I'm facing, I first look at my own battery of knowledge, what's back there. And if I don't know how to address the problem set for which I'm facing, I then go seek the knowledge. I don't have the necessary skill. Where do I go gain the knowledge so that I can learn the skill and fix the problem I'm ahead of? That's attitudinal. That's personal responsibility in the world of preparedness, right? So as a prepper, what we do is we simply do that, right? If I'm faced something I don't know how to do, I go and learn how to do it, right? So over time, and everything that I learn and everything that you need to learn in life is free of charge. Elon Musk, no matter what you think of him, is not wrong when he clearly states that almost everything short of trauma surgery that you need to know has a series of YouTube videos on this channel or podcasts that tell you how to do it and show you how to do it. It's out there, right? The fact that you've chosen not to learn it or chosen not to do the research is fine, but it's there. So there's no monetary barrier to you gaining the skills and knowledge necessary to do all the things that I want. Now, you may say, I can't afford solar panels. Oh, okay. That's absolutely not the only way to do this. It is a methodology, but it is not the only way. When you look at how those societal systems would take a knee, as we used to say in the Army, for a period of time before they recover, what does that look like for you and your family? What skills and knowledge do you need to be able to replicate to the closest level possible normal life without critical infrastructure support? So, for example, the pandemic was a great lesson. A great lesson for a lot of people, and number one, how unprepared. This entire company and this podcast channel was started because I was totally, as we say in East Coast, gobsmacked by how abjectly unprepared Canadians and people around the world for a couple of months disruption. I was just blown away about how fast people had to call for the benevolent government to swing in with their magical money to save people. I was utterly astonished that people would allow themselves to get to that level. But that's because the preparedness conversation was not a conversation that was normalized. It was not a conversation we would have on a regular basis. The fact that you had a good job, but you were still living paycheck to paycheck, was the normalized behavior that was deemed acceptable in society. So if that's how you chose to live your life, that was okay because that's what everybody else was doing, right? It was okay that you were, 2 paychecks away from losing your house or getting kicked out of your apartment, because that was the way everybody was doing it. And then the pandemic came along and stopped all of that. And everybody was so poorly prepared for that. We started this podcast. We started the company. We started offering all of our products. And by the way, if you're looking for the printed out version of this, drop over to preparednesslabs.ca, go up on our Shopify store to the catalog, pull it down, and you'll see there's a free 4-step guide to preparedness there. You don't have to buy the book. I'll offer it to you for free. It'll get you started and start you down the train. We've got 370 almost episodes of this podcast. We've got hundreds of Substack articles that are out there. We've got, our entire YouTube videos is something like 700 videos that are on here. All of the information that you need to adopt a prepared life and take care of your family is available here free of charge. And I unabashedly offer it free of charge because it's our community service. If you want it summated in one spot that's in a logical, easy to find format, that's where the paid products come in. But if you're not willing to do that, that's perfectly fine. All the rest of the stuff is available for free. So if you understand those skills and knowledge, the last part that we have to talk about is community. Because we're not, as a human species, we're not lone wolves. The lone wolf perishes and the pack survives. We are a tribal species, whether you look at sociological, anthropological, or even some of the great recent literature in behavior economics looking at human decision making. We are a collective species. We thrive with other people. Being a prepper is not on your own. It has nothing to do with being a lone wolf. I don't know. I've met one of that 65 to 70 preppers that I've talked to. I've met one who is a go-it-alone lone wolf. And that's more of a response to life's issues and life's events that happen. That individual, I love him to death. I think he's a great human being. I don't know how well he'll do. Maybe just his positive attitude towards his self-reliance will get him through the calamity. But all the rest of them understood that even as a prepper in an urban or suburban environment, they are going to be successful as a group. So most of them are collectively part of a quiet group. Because if I was to stand up and say, hi, I live in Ottawa and I'm part of a prepper group, you'll all start thinking I'm crazy. You'll all start thinking nuts. So most preppers have a group of individuals for which they're friends, for which they periodically will jump into discussions about preparedness, not very often, but that they understand we have that social connection. We have that strong relationship over a common idea, and we trust each other with norms of reciprocity, that I will be there to take care of them and they will be there to take care of me. And in that relationship as a group, in our reasonably close physical proximity in our neighborhood, that will be okay. That we'll be able to navigate whatever it is. If the power goes out in the city of Ottawa for 60 to 90 days, there's a group of us that will be fine. Disrupted? Yeah, absolutely. A little bit off kilter? Sure. Maybe a little extra shot of whiskey? Probably won't hurt. But our families will emerge fine without any support from the government, without any outside intervention. And it's not because we've committed a great deal of money. Some of us have committed a little bit of money. There's at least one person I know in the east end of Ottawa who is pretty well off and has committed zero money and is very proud of it. And their family is ready to go for an exceptionally long term without actually spending any money. So what they've done is they've dedicated the time and effort to learn about knowledge and skills and a bunch of other things that they can do. So now they have the ability to basically on their small family, house lot, able to basically grow the vast majority of food that they need for the run of a year out of their backyard in a city, in an urban environment. They can feed themselves. They can cook. They can clean. They can house. They can water. They can get rid of sanitation. Like, they've got the whole system figured out, and it didn't cost them any money, just time and effort. So it was brilliant, but we understand we don't survive as a prepper without community. Community is everything. When you think about it, some of the strongest communities should be your high-rise towers. If you think about high-density living, where you have, say, 20 stories, 10 apartments on each story, you've got 200 families living in there, that should be the tightest cohesive group of preparedness you find anywhere. That building should be able to absolutely rock through any calamity short of a fire that kicks everybody out. Short of that should be one rock-solid community. Unfortunately, we don't normalize the preparedness discussions. When we start talking about preppers, people start correlating that to craziness, idiocy, and a whole bunch of other, conspiracy theorists is another great one I get called all the time. When I start questioning logic behind certain decisions, I get called a conspiracy theorist, which again is fine. If I'm going to put my face on social media like this, I've got to be able to take it when it gets thrown at me, and it does get thrown at me. So I get called a conspiracy theorist, which is perfectly fine. If that's the entertainment that people want to get out of their day, then I'm happy to help them out with that. That's not a problem. But the issue is we don't have these preparedness discussions in our communities. We don't have it. Like, you don't go up to your neighbor and say, hey, are you prepared for a 30-day power outage? That doesn't normally come up. But we need to begin the process to start to normalize a set of discussions in our communities about what does our world look like when the power goes out and it doesn't come back on. What does our world look like when the next pandemic comes down, more restrictions are imposed? Are we any better off than they were before? What if the government of the day decides it doesn't have the money for, in Canada, we called it a CERB, for example? Or a CEBA for the business loans. I'm a small business owner, right? Why do I expect the government to pay my bills for me? Except that's a logical outcome when the government imposes a rule that prevents me from earning the normal income I do, then yes, I do believe the government owes me that money, not in a loan, but in an absolute gift. Again, it's the libertarian in me. If you close a business for COVID, you need to pay the business 100% of its lost revenue, or don't close it. That's just a personal opinion. But we have these disruptions coming, likely, we don't know, but we know the 2020s right up till about 2032, 2033 are going to continue to be exceptionally disruptive. And we're not normalizing these discussions in our communities, in our businesses, in our organizations, in our government. We're not normalizing the conversation about preparedness in our communities. You don't need some magical kits, which I think are absolutely useless. You don't need a whole bunch of other things. What you need is to build social bonds with your neighbors, with your communities, and just sit down over your favorite cup of coffee, cup of tea, cup of whiskey, whatever it may be. Sit around in the backyard or the community center and say, hey, what does our world look like when the power goes out but it doesn't come back on? What does that look like for you? Right? Do we take care of the elderly lady living on her own 3 houses down whose family is out of town? Are we actively making the effort to identify vulnerable people in our community? It's not the government's job to identify them and take care of them. That's our community's responsibility. It has been for millennia. For thousands of years, it's been the community's role to take care of the community in time of disaster, right? So it's the community's role to feed, water, and house the community when there's a disruption, when there's things that happen. We need to get back to that idea. That doesn't cost any money, by the way. Again, for those of you who are going to keyboard warriors jump all over me about government programs and government funding, none of it's required other than the consultants that want to run that program. Yes, they want to make some money, and they'll go after government for funding to do that. But we do it for free. Right? Absolutely. We train businesses that we charge businesses for, but we're happy to train communities free of charge. Absolutely, without a question. So the whole point we're making here today is a prepper is a normalized human being who just sees that there's a potential for a significant event to happen and significant disruption, and they've taken the steps necessary to ensure that they and their family have what they need. And again, for the keyboard warriors out there, this is not tied to finance. There is not a socioeconomic barrier to preparedness. I've been a professor in this for a significant time. I've written over 1,000 pages on individual and community preparedness. I will challenge anyone who wants to believe that there is a socioeconomic barrier to preparedness. It is the state that creates that by telling people that you have to buy things to become prepared, or you have to have a list of things to become prepared. When they tell you that, they create the barrier to preparedness themselves. So if we just get the government to stop telling people that, then we would take away the perceived socioeconomic barrier to preparedness. So thank you very much for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe Head. Listen, I hope all of this was helpful to you. Drop over to our website, www.insidemycanoehead.ca, or to our parent company, preparednesslabs.ca. Drop me an email. All the contact information is there. Stay tuned. We've got a wonderful series coming up. We're going to talk about AI and preparedness. What does that mean? What are those disruptions? And what could that look like for you? And we're going to talk a lot more about all of you who have small and medium businesses and enterprises, online businesses, and what did the coming disruption mean for you? So thanks again for joining us. Take care and stay safe.